Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kyla and
Toyah. And today we are going to talk about fear and anxiety. So fear and anxiety, both in the Corona time that we're in, the pandemic, and just in general in life. So you're up.
Okay. So let's see. Some important news before I begin. I busted out of my 14-day self-quarantine and went outside, and the sky is so blue and the air is so fresh. I just was like, I will never take you for granted, Earth. So thank you. Just a little shout out to Earth and happy belated Earth Day, Earth. Okay. So this past week and the week before, I've been doing a lot of workshops around fear. And so we thought we would talk about fear and anxiety, because that's something that's been coming up for and with people. So a couple thoughts. One is that we all have fear of some kind. And the second thing that was really cool to notice is that, when you share your fears, it's like you feel you're not alone, right? You're like, oh, that person, that person has a fear, that person has fears. And then the third thing that I noticed is that a lot of us have similar fears, and they're not necessarily to do with Corona per se. Like, I noticed that, when one person would be sharing their fears, everybody else would be like, I got you. I also have that fear. So that's kind of what's coming to mind around fear for me. What about what's coming up for you on anxiety, Toyah?
Anxiety, I would say, so I actually have an anxiety disorder. So I was diagnosed over 20 years ago with severe anxiety. And so when that happened, because I was like, there's nothing that I'm anxious about. I was graduating from college. I had my new job set up. Life was great. It didn't make sense. And so it was explained, I was 21 at the time, that sometimes if you're just excited, that could produce the same sort of, I didn't really understand it. So I ended up, long story short, I was fainting. I was having all these physical issues. And when I got a second opinion, I was just told well, just rest. So I never did anything about the anxiety. 20 years later, I was diagnosed again with severe anxiety. I'm not sure if anyone can relate to feeling like you have a disorder or you've been labeled with something, but you're like, I don't really feel that way. But for me, most of the time I'm pretty chill, or at least I think I am, not super worried. I'm not a big worrier, but there are some things that I have either a phobia about, or I'm extra prepared. And that's almost what keeps me out of the fear, is that I come up with this wild thing, and I just go with it right away. And then it's there's no reason to be afraid. So with Corona, for me, I was like, oh, well, Corona is in the air droplet. You breathe the droplets, it's going to move with the wind. And so I was keeping my windows shut for I didn't open my windows for about 3 weeks. So windows were shut. I barely went outside unless I absolutely had to. And I wasn't sitting around in the house feeling I'm so scared about Corona, or I'm scared I'm going to get it, because I had my protective plan together. And so for me, what came out is listening to other people sometimes. So, and just being honest with yourself, because having anxious feelings and being afraid is actually different from having an anxiety disorder. And so sometimes it's not rational, and sometimes fear isn't either. But, being able to just look at it from the outside in, and listen to other people also, and recognize you're being a little ridiculous here. I'm calling myself ridiculous. If you're feeling like you still want to keep your windows shut, I am not calling you ridiculous. Me, I recognize that I was kind of tripping. And so I went to the store with my mask on. I went on a walk yesterday for the first time with my mask on. I sat outside. So I listened to other people, checked myself, and then just went with it. And sometimes the anxiety is about something where the chances are it's small that it's going to happen. So it's like, be safe, be careful, but like, do I need to like not have any fresh air when there's so many benefits from getting fresh air? No, I'm probably going to need some air. Like, I'm probably going to need some. So that's what came up for me with anxiety and Corona. So
yeah, I thank you for sharing about having your own anxiety disorder, and also the differences between feeling anxious from time to time. We talk about depression on the show, and, there's a differential too between, being diagnosed with like a depressive disorder versus feeling, depressive feelings from time to time. And I think, Corona's just really been this magnifying glass, right, of the stuff that we have maybe not looked at. And we're like, I don't want to look at it. And so I think what's been helpful for me is kind of looking at whether it's fear or anxiety or any kinds of feelings or emotions that you feel are no longer serving you. I think in life, we get these opportunities, right, to either avoid them, so this situation, or survive them, the duck, like, that's above water and like this, and then the feet are like, or grow from them. And so, each time you have a moment, like maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to close my window, that's kind of like, maybe more avoidance or survival, but then, then you learn, right? Like, as you mentioned, Toyah, you're like, oh, wait, upon reflection, I could have maybe opened my window, or, you were, as you said, tripping, but that's my dance. That's my tripping dance. We'll show you the Coronashuffle later. That's another way to get out of fear and anxiety. Do the Coronashuffle. But moving from avoidance and survival of like the window or not going out to, oh, wait, maybe there are these amazing benefits of being outside. The sun feels so good. And we talked earlier about how we both were super exhausted from like being out in the sun after long periods of not. But, that vitamin D is so good and so beneficial. So yeah, just curious of, Toyah, like if you have some tips that you'd love to share with our audience about, how you deal with anxiety.
So what I actually did a series on how to shut down a freakout, right? So like part of that is you're feeling these feelings, and it's okay to feel them and recognize that they're happening. So like just within the past, I would say, year or two or so, I've recognized that like I feel it in my chest, like I feel it like chest, throat, like that kind of thing is happening. So just knowing like, okay, it's happening now, and recognizing that it's it's going on, and let the feelings occur, but not like give in to the panic that kind of ensues. So I learned that emotions can leave your body within 90 seconds. So, and the chemical reactions from the emotion. And so a lot of us will say, well, they don't leave my body in 90 seconds. And that's because we keep adding to it. So it's this big snowball. So if you feel the feeling and then you integrate some deep breathing, you're getting oxygen to your brain. So your brain has kind of gone offline, and now you're getting oxygenated, whatever the word is. And it's calming you down also. So if you could do deep breathing cycle for just that 90 seconds and just focus on the breathing, then that feeling has subsided without you escalating it. So I love deep breathing. Like sometimes I do it on the phone. Like I might be in a conversation and I'm just like, I got to do a couple of deep breaths to like calm it on down. So that's one. And then I'll just give one more because I just read about this today and I thought it was kind of cool. It was setting aside time for your like worry session. So, but the difference is in that time, so say it's like, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes, 2 o'clock is my worry time. And you keep your time consistent. So you're like, I'm not worrying, I'm not going to do that. At 2 o'clock is when I'm going to do it. And during that time, you are focused not on all of the what ifs, because that's what anxiety really is. It's the what ifs versus being afraid of something you know is going to happen. Focus on why that's a problem for you. Why am I concerned about that? So not the focus on, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, but like, why is that bothering me so much? And then what can I do about it? So that's what you do in your worry time, is almost strategize like and figure out like what's going on with this. So I thought that was pretty awesome. So I thought I'd share that one.
I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, I think those are so helpful and so practical. And there's so much overlap with like fear and like just the other day when you were talking about the deep breathing, because one of the participants in one of my fear workshops was like, how do you measure growth? And I actually said like that you feel it in your body, right? So every time you have fear or anxiety, like where do you feel it? And for me, it's in the pit of my stomach. And then we also talked about breathing, like getting oxygen to that part of your body and how that's free. And then just asking yourself, like, how does it serve me to hold on to this? Right. And sometimes it serves you, right? Like it's protection. You feel protection. You feel it's like survival. You feel safe. Maybe that's the only thing that you know, or like how to deal with something. The other thing that's really cool that we talk about and that I've been learning too, is that sometimes fear and anxiety is inherited. Like from we as children, 0 to 7, we look at parents or grandparents and how they deal with something. And because we don't talk about this stuff at school, you know, like financial, like how to balance your checkbook, or there are no checkbooks anymore, how to balance your statement after you print it out. But you know, like we don't talk about money at school. We're not learned in talking about money. And so similarly with emotions, we know only what we've inherited or what we've seen, and we mimic. So it's interesting to ask, like, is it yours? You know, is that emotion? I love the 90-second thing. You know, after you notice it and not judging, like what Toyah said, and then you breathe through it. Wait, is it mine? And you're like, oh. And often, like I was texting Toyah this past week, like, oh, I'm having like this anxiety about like this fear workshop. Like I had fear around fear. And like she said about getting another perspective, like that's you getting out of here and getting out into somebody else's perspective of that reframe. She gave me incredible advice and reframed it for me. And I was like, oh, my mind was like, that's so cool. Thank you. So, you know, I think it's really helpful to ask yourself these types of questions in a kind, compassionate, non-judgmental way, if possible. So yeah. Is there anything else, Toyah? It's getting dark. It's getting dark over there.
You know, I think I need to actually start looking up sunset time. So, but I think there's a couple things that you said that I would add to. One was getting out of your head and the perspective. Another way of getting it out of your head is writing it down. So it's not circulating in your head over and over again and constantly reminding you. It's just actually you're getting it out as you write out like whatever the situation, what your feelings are, or your checklist, or maybe it's like you're anxious about like a to-do list, whatever it is, just get it out of yourself and put it onto paper. Like that's a good practice to have. And then now I'm forgetting because I was listening so intently. Now I can't remember. There was another thing that I was going to add. So yeah.
Can I share my drawing?
Yes.
So this is you, and then like asking fear or anxiety, why are you here? So that's what we've been doing, like, and I think that like it's similar to what you were saying about like get it out, and for every thought you have, just get it out on paper or on a Post-it note. And so it's out. And so you can see and even organize, what's going on in your mind. For me, it's drawing and like picturing, like, what does fear look like to me? Like, and even working with clients, right? It's like, does it show up to you as a grim reaper? Your mom, some people are afraid of their mothers, or they're afraid of, like Corona. But yeah, I mean, I think like the two of us could go on and on about all of our.
I have to add one more. I have to.
Yeah, of course.
I don't even know where we are at on time. Is the reframing. So like, Kyla mentioned how she texted and we had a conversation, and like we're regular people, but we're also coaches. So there's like a coachy kind of language that sometimes comes out sometimes. But like when you're reframing things and you're thinking, you just pay attention to your language, whether it's what you're saying out loud or the thoughts that you're having, and how can you think about it or say it differently. So especially when it's something that you don't know for sure is going to happen. So if you're looking at a situation and you're saying, this is, all the things that you're worried about, this is going to happen and this is going to happen, it's to flip it and say, maybe it's not, or this might happen instead of this is going to happen. But there's so many subtle ways that you can like reframe the situation that already calms you down instead of going to the extreme of the situation. So that's the other, but she's right. On and on and on. Like, I think it was a 3 or 4 day series. Like I did 3 days or 4 days on shutting the freakout down. So there's so much, but I think tips that we gave today are helpful. Let us know if they are. If you have extra tips, you can just drop them in the comments below.
Not thumbs down. I mean, down below.
Down. Yes. And give it but speaking of a thumb, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And since Kyla said we were going to show you the Coronashuffle, which I don't know if it's time for that right now. So when I was thinking about the wind blowing and how I didn't want the windows open because, the Corona was going to blow on in, and someone outside as they walked, it was going to go into the air and then it was going to blow and blow. And so that's the Coronashuffle. It's like blowing and blowing.
Okay.
By the way, we laugh about everything, but let me just say, COVID-19 is serious. And even though we are having fun, we feel this is a serious matter. Staying at home, being careful, being safe, caring about everybody's different situation with it. And that being said, we can still have joy and laugh at a time like this. So in case anyone was feeling a little insensitivity, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. And that's another tip, right? Like,
laugh.
That's like the reframe of like humor, right? Not in a facetious, like mocking kind of way at the seriousness of the situation of COVID, but seeing it from a different perspective and different angle.
Which is kind of what we do here when we talk about depression and everything else.
That's so true.
So again, subscribe, and share with friends. So that's pretty, I think that's it. Is that it for today?
Yeah, and then the should we do the Coronashuffle on 3 together?
Ah! Okay. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2. Join with us.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
See, everyone can have their different way that the wind blows. 2 hand, 1 hand. I feel like I'm in Hawaii. Okay, so now my turn to sing. Bye.